Ask the Podcast Coach for July 11th, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it is Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, the one and only Jim Cullison from The Average Guy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. A little bit of a scratchy, I think it's maybe it's allergies or something. You know, it's that time of the year, a little scratchy voice this morning. So as podcasters, right, we got to learn to kind of not push it too hard when you get that, because you can really hurt your voice.
Yeah. I know I right now am hopped up on ibuprofen, the generic kind. I have a weird thing going on where I am not sleeping well and keep waking up where I've been sleeping on my stomach, which is not good for me. And I wake up and I'm just like, and so, yeah.
Sorry to hear that. Well,
I'm not.
You know what's good for both is
coffee. You know, that's right. It's time for the morning pour.
Morning pour.
Brought to you by podcastbranding.co. If you're looking to basically look great in general, whether that's your podcast artwork or a website, or if you have an ebook cover, anything you need, Mark has got you covered. He's an award-winning graphic artist for 13 years. He's a podcaster. And the other thing is he's a really cool guy. I'm going to give you behind-the-scenes stuff. He's the guy that not only designed the logo behind me, the School of Podcasting one. I have a new show, Grow Your Community, and we showed it here on the show. And I went to make the first artwork for my first official episode. And I was like, ooh, this would work so good if I didn't have the hands and the little paper dolls things. I could put and I just said, hey, I don't know if I need to pay you. And it was like, can I get a version of this with just the Grow Your Community at the top? And he was nice enough to do that. So I don't know. I kind of go, that's a revision. You know, I should have probably paid for that, but he was a super nice guy. And the other thing is, you know, that Mark is actually the guy that's designing your artwork. We talked about that last week with some, what do you call that? Fraud, I guess.
Fiverr fraud.
Yeah. When people are saying, hey, I did this. And you're like, no, you didn't. So check him out over at podcastbranding.co and let him know that, you know, Jim and Dave sent you. So
yeah, no, I don't want any false advertising either. Maybe coffee's not good for you. Good for me, but not good for you. And you're such ibuprofen and coffee. I don't know.
It's good to know, but yeah, it's
hope you feel better, man.
It's one of those things where it kicks in, but man, in the morning, it's weird things like this, like looking down and kind of turning my neck. But the really good thing is it's raining here. And I was so glad because A, I have to do my taxes today, and B, I can't go ride my bike. So that's always
kind of forces you indoors, kind of keeps you that way. You know, two tough things on a podcaster. One is if you're not sleeping well, like I know I just don't do my best work. You know, I don't talk as well. I don't produce as well. I don't edit as well. I just don't. It's tough when you're exhausted. I've stopped doing the late night podcast edits just because of that. Like once I start getting tired, I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I need to be rested when I do that. It just kind of throws you off your game, you know? And so I think that rest is, I've said on the show here, I have trouble sleeping as well. And it's gotten better. Ironically, weirdly, it's gotten better during the pandemic, but man, when I'm not sleeping well, it's tough. So get your sleep, get your rest. I think it's really important as podcasters that we don't get on the microphone because you get kind of angry too sometimes.
Yeah. Randy says, well, that explains why I don't do anything well.
Randy's amazing. He gets like an hour of sleep a night and somehow still functions. I don't know how he does that.
Yeah, I can't do that.
I would have. I
did have a thing.
You're a better man than me.
I had a Randy moment where I woke up at 3 a.m. and could not go back to sleep till about 6 when I usually kind of almost think about getting up. And it was just like, it's weird where sometimes you just can't turn your brain off. So that's always fun.
Yeah, no, right on. Well, I mean, there's lots of things that can cause that, right?
Yeah.
Besides physical ailments, right? And just stress, anxiety. I mean, the world's pretty calm right now, so I don't know how anybody's worried about it. But
I was talking to Harry Duran yesterday and Natalie, just because I hadn't, it's like, hey, normally I would have seen you once or twice in an event, but like, why don't we get on Zoom and touch base? And Harry and Natalie are in like Minneapolis. Like they're like, oh yeah, all that stuff you were seeing on the news, that's about 5 blocks that way. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of crazy.
It's crazy time.
Yeah.
Crazy time.
Yeah. I do want to say I want to take credit for a story. James Cridlin, let me throw this in the chat room. I had so many people obsess over ID3 tags, and I was kind of like, and it's not so much ID3 tags for SEO. Now, if you're new to ID3 tags, I always use the analogy of a tree. If you cut down a tree, you look at the rings on the inside, it'll tell you a little bit about the life of the tree. If you cut open an MP3 file, you will see ID3 tags. And I kind of was like, how I cannot connect the dots that Google is somehow looking inside an MP3 file to boost SEO. And so James Cridlin saw me mention that in a Facebook group, and he did a test and basically came to the conclusion that no, they don't help SEO. He goes, and he was making the joke of like, they will work great on your Rio MP3 player. He goes, but in terms of SEO, no. The only time I had a Rio, I remember that before I had an iRiver. iRivers were big back in 2006. They were great because it was an MP3 player, and you could plug a microphone into it and record. So it was,
or throw it at somebody and kill them. It's like a brick. Like it was a big box.
There were the big box. I had one that was about the size of my thumb.
Oh,
so I want to say it had like 256K of memory in it. So you
megs, technically it was megs.
Yeah. What I say, gigs?
No, you said K.
Yeah.
256K would.
Yeah, that would be nothing. Yeah.
But
you could throw 20 songs on it or whatever, and that whole 9 yards.
MP3s were, I remember this is 96, 97 when the MP3 kind of was getting more and more popular. And I remember people ripping those things. It took them, like an album would take a whole day to rip. A whole day.
Yeah. Coach Dave here says electronic devices are distractions and were killing me. I switched to a writing tablet with no LED light and a big difference in sleep. I did the thing now on the computer where it's always weird when all of a sudden my screen starts to turn orange. Mm-hmm. And it's something with blue light or whatever. And that's
night mode.
Yeah. I kind of like that because otherwise, there are times. I remember when I was growing up and I was in my 20s and I built this little recording studio in my basement. I remember the one night I was just down there and I'm, programming drum machines and all this other stuff. And I looked up and it was like 4:15 in the morning. And I was like, wait, what? How did that happen? And I don't do it quite to that extreme, but there are times when I've looked up and I'm like, hey, wait, it's 2:30? Like I should be in bed. And so by having my screen start to change colors, I'm like, oh, it's getting close to nighttime. I should probably wrap up whatever I'm doing.
I have I'm using some home automation to turn off this light above me at a certain time of the night as a reminder, right? It just goes off. And then it's like, okay, I need to get, that's by the way, that's the last straw for me. Like when that goes off, I know it's like, okay, get up, no matter what you're doing, get up and go to bed because it's late. Dave, I'm showing MP3 tag. If you can pop that up really quick.
Oh,
what I could never figure out, back to this MP3 discussion, right? And so you've got these, you've got these various file name, title, artist, right? Album, artist. What are people jamming in here that they think they're getting SEO? Like, which I don't see anything genre in comments, right? I don't see anything in here. What are people jamming in here?
Well, usually it's the title, the author, but especially the comments. They think comments, like they'll jam keywords in their comments and things like that.
Okay.
But the other thing that's just kind of odd about it is, again, this was a big deal probably up through, I don't know, 2008 maybe. I forget when Apple just quit using them. And they're intense. Like, I need to update my ID3 tags. Like I'm missing out on SEO. And I was like, I don't think you are.
Well, why can't they just update? Why can't they use a tool like MP3 tag and update them and push them forward? What's the big deal?
It's not so much how to do an ID3 tag is the fact that they just feel they're missing out on SEO goodness.
Get it done.
And it's and I'm always like, well, you can, like with Libsyn and Blueberry, you can actually click a button and it will add the ID3 tags for you based on what you have in your episode. So I was always like, if it's a Libsyn customer, I'm like, oh, just click that button and click publish. It'll push your ID3 tags right in there. And they're like, yeah, but I need to enter it in the keywords. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, yeah. So that's always, it was just one of those things that I'm always like, I don't think so. I think you're, and they're just, that's the thing. It's they're doing it for SEO stuff. And then B, they're just intense. Like if I don't get this in the next 10 minutes, like I'm going to quit my podcast. And I'm like,
that MP3 tag really makes that easy, by the way. If you want to update this morning, I was uploading my podcast and I noticed last week or 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago when I posted, I must have been sleeping or hammered or something. And I'd moved some titles around and some stuff. It was just a mess. So I just went back in and fixed it. And then you just upload all three and overwrite them on your server and you're done. And so that MP3 tag has just been, and I include them just because I think it's the right thing to do to have the title and copyright and some other stuff information in there. I don't obsess about it. It's just something I do. It's something I've always included. It's in my workflow, so I just do it. I don't put much in there. I don't think anybody's going to find it that way, but certainly if somebody downloads the file, which some do, then they have all the information they need to populate whatever player they're using.
That's it. I always put in the author, the name of the podcast, the name of the episode number. The author is in this case Dave Jackson, Jim Cullison, and then in the comments it's like for more information go to askthepodcastcoach.com/302 in this case.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea.
And that's it really. Dan says in the chat room, he goes, I don't use Spotify, but I had a listener mention the artist tag on my show wasn't there. That might be based on the author field in whatever your media host is, whatever you're using to make your feed. So I use that button on Libsyn now, but wasn't aware players like Spotify even use them. Yeah, that's a new one. I'll have to look. I didn't know that they did. The only thing I know right now that uses them is Overcast uses the image. That's it. Everything else is coming from your feed, but usually the artist is based on the author field. So
I think it's good practice. Like regardless of who you use, whether you're using PowerPress or you're using Libsyn to populate it or whatever, that if you have a blank field, spend a little time figuring out like what's it intended for, because they probably didn't program it for no reason. Like it's probably there because it populates somewhere. You might want to, because I know like if you go into PowerPress and all the different options you have to fill out stuff, eventually like enough. I can't put any more information in this thing. I'm just going to leave it blank. You might, it could be okay, but in this case where Spotify's using it, might want to do just a little bit of research just to make sure you're taking advantage of all the fields that are.
Well, I just found out that, and it's new because it's a new service. I'm using Podpage for some of my podcasts, and this is that tool where you just basically submit your RSS feed and it builds a website out of it. It's actually pretty cool. And but in Libsyn and in PowerPress, there's always a subtitle field, and I cannot find where that shows up anywhere. I know at one point, if you were in Apple iTunes and you hovered over the I button, it might show up. I mean, you really had to dig for it. And I don't know that it's being used anywhere. It's still there. But Podpage is now using that as kind of like a little baby summary. And I'm like, oh, I need to put something in there now.
Go back in there. And it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea to spend spend some time researching it.
Yeah. The Working Cows podcast says Podcast Addict uses the image as well. There you go. So I know there's a few, and I'm with you, Jim. I'm like, it takes all of 2 seconds to add the ID3 tags, especially Jim showed me the cool trick. If you're using, what is it? MP3 tag?
Yeah. The one we just showed.
Yeah. Is you can right click on your last episode and go copy tag, then click on the file that doesn't have any tags and go paste tags. So it gives you all the tags from last week. Well, the author, the name of the episode, that stays the same. So you just change the title and the episode number and anything else in the comments, and you're good to go. So
it's super fast. Like I spend 20 seconds on 93 tags.
Yeah.
So I don't even know, you're like, in fact, so bad. Sometimes, I try to update the copyright information just to keep the year, or in some cases, it has a year field in there. So when was it? And I've gone 2 or 3 months, like the year's changed and it's gone 2 or 3 months with the old year in there. Cause I don't even check it. I just right click copy, right click paste, change the episode number, change the title. I'm in good shape.
Yeah, Chris says, I love the point you made, Dave, where you generally said that you never know if one day they do use this data and only takes a few minutes. Yeah, because in the same way that one day we just woke up and guess what? Nobody's using these anymore. And we're like, what? They might just someday go, hey, you know what? It'd be cool if we use those things again. So I just keep putting them there in case things switch back, because you just never know with with technology. Working Cows Podcast says, I also have a surprising number of people who download the file directly from a player on my website. So I figured it's good for that info to be populated in whatever player they're using. Yeah, that's really where it gets used, because at that point it's not in a feed anymore. So it puts it there, and it's not like the end of the world if it's not there. Like I know on a Windows machine, if you download it, I think Windows Media Player is still the default. I don't know.
Or
is it the other thing?
Groove.
Yeah.
I think their Groove player replaced that.
Yeah, I'll have to see what happens. But I know in Windows Media Player, you used to get what I affectionately refer to as the gray music note of death, which is just this gray music note, and it would come up. And again, it doesn't stop it from playing. It just, like, if everybody else has an image and you don't, people are going to go like, wait, what's wrong with his? What's with this gray music note thing? So it's not not the end of the world, but it is kind of and that's why I said it's like if it took me 5 minutes to do, I'd be like, I don't know, we'll see. But that's where it comes into play, is if somebody downloads it. It
is a little annoying if I've got an MP3 file that I'm playing from somewhere, or whatever reason, and it just is the name of the file .mp3, and there's absolutely no information. It'd be kind of nice, it's not hard to put it in. So I guess there's a balance, right? Don't obsess about it. Don't put nothing. Like, fill in the
and I always name my files something so that I know what it is. So if I look and Ask the Podcast Coach, it's something like ATPC, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, ATP. Oh, here we go. If I scroll down, ATPC _ 2020 -288, meaning that's the episode number, -04-11. So it's April 11th. Now, where that comes into play, and it usually never ever does, is if for some reason you switch media hosts. And then later, now sometimes you can do some cool things. This is why one of my criteria for a media host is don't change my file name. Because if you change the file name, I can't do a cool find and replace. Like, let's say I move from Libsyn to PowerPress. I could say, hey, find everything that's feeds.traffic.libsyn. whatever, and then my file name, I could say find that and replace with PowerPress.feed/whatever, and boom, my website's updated. But if you change my file name, and then the fun part is, if you're trying to figure out what file is what, if you've got the date in your file, you can go to it and say, oh, here's the one from April 11th. This is the file, and you upload it in that whole 9 yards. So I've only had to do that, I think, twice in 15 years, where I was playing with something and I was like, they changed everything. So it's a very, very niche, need.
Yeah, but when it's like backup, you don't want to, it's like when you need it. So, it's one of those kinds of things that you want to make sure you get right and just check from time to time. But go ahead.
I'm just glad you brought that up. I was listening to the No Agenda show today, and Bangs in the chat room was talking about how India pulled TikTok. The new version of I don't want to get into to politics, but the new episode of the No Agenda show, there's this big shot smarty pants guy explaining all the things that, like, not the Chinese people, right. Chinese government is like. Do you remember the Equifax hack? Yeah, that was the Chinese army. Yeah. Sure. And they just go through a whole bunch of stuff, and that's what I'm like, and that's why I'm not putting TikTok on my phone. Yeah. But they also mentioned that there was this guy, I've never heard of him, apparently huge YouTuber, and got completely deplatformed. And he was saying, he did a video and he's like, hey, he was doing a Patreon thing, like, hey, if you want to support me over here, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I've lost hundreds, or I think he said thousands of videos and all these comments. And they were kind of saying the same thing I did. Like, don't you save your content? Like I've seen people do this though. Like there's a great feature in Hindenburg where you can go, hey, file, publish this to Libsyn, and it'll actually publish it to Libsyn. And if you want it to, it'll take, here we go again with ID3 tags, take your ID3 tags and turn that into the episode. So it's literally like one click, publish, done. The only thing I don't like about that feature is the file only exists then on Libsyn. There's no local copy. So I always export to my hard drive and then, I'll throw it into Dropbox or Mediafire or Google Drive or whatever you want. But I always keep, do you keep copies of all your old files?
Oh, like 8 or 9 copies of my own files. Yeah. In fact, so I have about 2 terabytes of storage for the podcast stuff. I've been doing this for about 10 years. So about 2 terabytes. That includes some other stuff, but a lot of podcast files. And Dave, I actually sync. So I have a storage here that's like a terabyte cache drive, and then it backs up to Backblaze, so that I've got the most current files I'm using here, and then everything's on Backblaze. So it's about a 2 terabyte backup. So last weekend I had some problems. Actually 2 weeks ago, I moved some things around on a box. It caused a conflict. I had a syncing application that went between the one box and my Drobo to back those up, because I have a full local copy available as well. So I have the original and a full local copy, and then we have Backblaze, like 3-2-1 backup. So, but the backup broke, the sync broke, and so the sync was trying to download the entire catalog of everything, 2 terabytes, right? Everything. And so I had 6 terabytes in 10 days. I had 6 terabytes of bandwidth usage. Cox only gives me 1. So I had to quickly call them and say, hey, and they're like, well, I didn't talk about this on the show last week, right? So good to know.
I think you did.
But if you go over, I found this out. If you go over, they only charge you $100. So
nice.
I thought it was going to be more. So anyways, we got that figured out. So those backups, it's important you have them, and it's important you check on them from time to time.
Yeah. Daniel from the Audacity to Podcast says, I just filled up my 5 terabyte archive hard drive. That's a lot of data.
That is a lot of data.
Brandon says, do you guys save your raw projects? I have every project file still and wonder if I need anything but the published MP3. I used to do 2 things. I wouldn't save the project, but I would export it as a WAV file. Mm-hmm. But I found that kind of works unless you want that one thing because a lot of times with my stuff, I have transition music. So if I just want that segment, it starts off with music that's fading out. And I'm like, so now I just save. It's one of those things where I'm kind of putting all my eggs in a basket. I will save I export it as an MP3, and then I save the Hindenburg project. So for some reason, Hindenburg just quit working on Windows. I'm screwed. I've got my finished MP3, but I don't have, and then I have like anything that uses files like the question of the month. I have all those files. And that's the one thing I like about Hindenburg. When you hit save and you pick a place for it to save your project, it puts all the files that are in that particular file in one folder. And so, and then Brandon says Hindenburg does put all the WAV. So in theory, I could just delete everything else in that folder. But I guess the other thing I kind of think of is hard drives are cheap. So if I ever really run out of,
here's the problem though with that is that, okay, so the sweet spot right now is about a 10 terabyte external drive. They're about $200, $215, let's just say.
Yeah.
But so in Daniel's case, he's got 5 terabytes. He just runs out. So he goes buys a 10 terabyte drive. Like, we're starting to get to the point now where that's a lot of data. And when it fails, if you don't have it replicated someplace else, it's not a matter of losing it. You still might, and you probably will, but the time it takes to recover some of that is enormous because the file transfer speeds haven't caught up to the storage. So the storage is big, but we're still not. I mean, if people are doing this via USB 3, it's going to take a while. So just be careful. I'm a big fan. I'm a bigger fan of more smaller drives and using some kind of like stable bit drive pool or some of those kinds of technologies to pool those drives together. So if one goes bad, you're not losing. It's like a version of RAID or a Drobo or a Synology or something, a NAS device of some kind that takes multiple 2 or 3 terabyte drives, which are cheap, by the way. They're super cheap. They're $60 and stripes those. So if one drive goes bad, which they do, I have a lot of hard drives and they do go bad from time to time. You don't lose everything. You don't have to recover it. Again, even if you got it to the cloud, these 2 terabytes that I have in the cloud, Dave, it still took 2 days to run through all those, right? It took 2 days and a break and then 2 days and a break. So yeah, just if you have that much data, there's just some things to consider more than just space. Space is just the first consideration. Then how do I move it around? It's why I keep a full second copy local, is because if my primary server goes down and I can't get to that information, I can always download it from Backblaze because it's there in the cloud.
Yeah.
But what if I want access to it right away and I don't want to wait for it, or I don't want to, that's just, for me, I want to keep 2 copies local.
There you go. And then you and Brendan are getting some sort of inside. You just say Unraid, and I'm like,
oh yeah, Unraid's a product we talk a lot about on Home Gadget Geeks.
That must be a nerd joke. I'm like, I know.
It is. It's more of a show joke because we talk about Unraid. We talk about Unraid. It's a very popular kind of product that does that for you, but it's pretty nerdy. Like your average person's not just going to set up Unraid and make it work. I think for podcasters, if you don't own some kind of NAS, if you're doing a lot of this, I keep the raw file. I keep the edited lossless edition for the audio. I make 2 copies of the video, a video large and a video small, and the MP3 itself when it's done from Auphonic. I keep all those. That's the thing I keep. I think if you do something like that, you probably need to have something more than a 2 terabyte external Seagate hard drive, which is terrible, by the way, as your backup. And, I did this for my sister. I said, okay, go buy a 2 terabyte drive. We're going to use it as a backup. So she bought it, plugged it in. She moved all her files to the 2 terabyte drive. She goes, okay, it's backed up. I'm like, no, that's not a backup. You can't, just because it's on a backup drive doesn't mean it's backed up. We need now to move it to the cloud and have a second copy somewhere else locally. So
that's it. That's the key. It's got to be someplace else, because if you have a backup on a 2 terabyte drive and your apartment goes up in flames, congratulations, you've now lost 2 copies of your.
You got to have it off site. You have to have something off site as well. But I recommend, if you're going to be doing this as a podcaster, you need to spend a little time, a little investment in getting like a NAS device. Synologies are great. They work for most people. They're drop dead simple. And it's a little bit of investment. You're probably talking $800 to $1,000 to.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But how much is your podcast worth to you, Dave?
Yeah, that's it. People always used to say, how long should I go without a backup? And I go, how much time you got to restore it? I go, because it's a pain in the butt. So I wanted to point out something here. I found it interesting. This is something Jim and I have talked about a lot, and I don't think you're not going to be able to read that. Let me read this to you. Because we have always talked about how if you're going to have a co-host and things like that, because this is, I put this in my Trello, is this is not going to end well. The guy says, if you have a full-time job, did anyone else decide to add a second day to your podcasting for content? And what was the turnout? It's something like I've tried with my team so far with good results. We go live and do a nice long show and do a post show. But recently we added a second day, and now I have no, quote, days off. I feel this is not good, a good feel for me yet, but my team I think feels different. I have a job that has offered me a promotion with lots of new training and potential income, and my team, with no fault of their own, has made me feel selfish for being reluctant for adding a second day. I'm looking for any advice or insight. I took my first off night from the show after 41 episodes and did not get good feedback, which has made me feel unhappy and pressured. I did not want them to think I love what we do less. I did not want them to think I love what we do less than them, but I also feel like I'm burning out. Help. So what are your thoughts on that, Jim? And the comments are kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, this is the tough one, because there's no great answer for it. You need to, for your own health, you need to make the decisions you need to make to be able to. I battle this conversation all the time at the Gallup podcast that we've done this year. So as of July 1st, I'd already done 50 for the year. I did 50 all of last year. So we're on pace to double our production number for 2020, right? I've kind of had some thoughts like, does that, like, that's affecting the way I feel about doing Home Gadget Geeks? I'm kind of like, I am really busy, right? And so, like, yeah, you have to kind of think through it. In this case, this person has other people who are applying downward pressure, right? To be like, no, we really want to do this. And I think you just have to have an open, honest conversation with those folks. And just,
well, that's it. And then I dug through the comments, and apparently some of their episodes are 4 hours long. And I'm like, okay. And then what was interesting is his co-host popped in, who is Josh. And he says, if he wants to take time off, he can. No one ever said he can't. LOL. What he isn't explaining is we just literally added Wednesdays and had to talk about adding more content. Not 1 week after it was added, he is saying he needs time off. Timing is frustrating, so we talk about it on the show. And then later he says, I look at the podcast like a band. We're only as strong as our weakest link. I work 60 to 70 hours a week, to which point I want to go, why are you doing a podcast? But okay, I was in bands well before the podcast. For me, just me, the only thing I ever wanted a break from was my real job. My podcast, my band, they're basically outlets for me. But the one thing I thought was interesting, because the guy had said they didn't get good feedback when he wasn't there. He goes, that not good feedback was us ribbing on him for not coming in. He goes, but he did decide to call into the show 3 times. He goes, which is fine, but I thought he needed the day off. Right. And that's when I just went, this is not going to end well.
No, I hope they have good agreements in place.
Yeah, I was just like, So, and the other thing I thought of, if they're doing 4-hour shows, I'm pretty sure you could cut that down to 2 and not really miss out on, because the other thing, that means they're doing 8 hours of podcast a week. And I'm like, either number one, if I'm going to paint with a really wide brush, I'm saying that podcast isn't as good as it could be, because 4 hours is a lot of time to hold somebody's attention. And I would, they didn't, to their credit, they didn't say what their show was, because you're not allowed to promote yourself in the Facebook group. Right. But I would love to know what it was. But Brandon brings up a great question. Does the audience want a second show? That's really what it comes down to. But I just the way it was going on. And then when the guy comes in and he's like, here's what I think's going on. I think this guy said, hey, I can't do a show on Wednesday. And he expected them to go, okay, well then we're not. And they went, okay, we'll just do one without you. And he went, what, huh? And I think his ego got maybe just a little bruised. I don't know, but it's just.
Are we sure this isn't David Lee Roth right before we leave? Because it does sound like.
It does.
It does sound like the lead singer, who's popular, who's kind of the voice on the show, kind of wants to go solo, but doesn't want to.
Yes, I want to do a side project, but I'm not leaving the band. And they went, no, that's all right. Go ahead.
I kind of need a break. I mean, It's kind of the Ross, our friends. I kind of need a break, but then doesn't want to lose control of, so when they do it on their own, they then the lead singer's kind of showing up like, oh, I just needed a break. Well, okay. No judgment in there. We're making fun of it. And I'm sorry if I offended anybody on that one. But
it is hard to, if you started something, to leave it. I was the editor of the student newsletter when I was in college, and we went from having no office and nothing to we had an office, we had a staff, and I really built it up. It was kind of cool. And then it dawned on me, if I really wanted to, graduate, I was going to have to go back to being just a writer. And when I left, the first thing they did was change the name of the newsletter. And I was like, my baby, what are you doing? So it's hard to leave. You got a question in the chat room from Maliquity. She says, how does someone leave an Apple podcast review if they don't have an iPhone? The answer is you don't. You can't. I don't know that there's
an iTunes on the desktop.
Yeah, you might be. Yeah. What do you think about it? Yeah, no, you can. But on an iPhone, I guess that would be it. And I don't know that you can because there's that kind of weird web version of Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I don't know. We'd have to look. Certainly the iTunes is a barrier to entry. Like, oh my God, that's like a 25-minute install, and it installs a whole bunch of other things in the process. Yeah, it's not great on Windows to begin with. So
Dan says that's how you do it. iTunes on a desktop, and if they have a Mac, chances are if they have a Mac, desktop isn't available. Then that is I'm pretty sure, I'm 90% sure you're not getting the review. And please keep in mind, reviews do not help you get found. They are only social proof.
They feel good though, right? Speaking of feeling good, I need some more coffee, Dave.
Yeah. Daniel, before we do that, Daniel says you can't leave ratings and reviews through Apple Podcast website. That's what I was thinking of. But yeah, Jim's ready for
we're halfway through, and I'm kind of
the mid pour. There we go. So, and our the mid pour is brought to you by our awesome supporters, which you can be at by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Speaking of that, today I want to say at 1:00. We're having a office hours is what I call it for the School of Podcasting. If you have a question, but you're a little shy and you don't want to do it in public, we have I guess a round table you would call it for the patrons today. We have the teacher's pet. If you need some one-on-one consulting at a discounted rate, that is still open. But we want to thank our $20 supporters. And you know what? We're going to come back to these websites maybe later in the post show. I want to play with something today. But and that is, if I go to these websites like debtshepherd.com, which is Greg does about teaching financial wellness. If I go there, can I contact him? Can I subscribe to the show? And can I listen? That's I want to do this with some websites today. Glenn the Geek Hebert who will be on the School of Podcasting, if not this week, next week. You can find him over at horseradionetwork.com. He just completed his 2,500th show. I was of one of his podcasts. Max Truscott over at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane at spyberry.com, who also, congratulations to Shane, was just featured in some magazine in England. So how cool is that because of his podcast? So congratulations to that. Also awesome people like Carl White in Life in the Carolinas podcast.com, Kim Karaji at Toastmasters101.net, and Ed Sullivan at soniccupcake.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, because Dave is paying his taxes, it'd be a really good time to do that. AskThePodcastCoach.com/awesome. You get access to the video version of the show as well as the post show. And like I said, you get basically free group coaching on a monthly basis. So check that out. AskThePodcastCoach.com/awesome.
Hey, can I make one more comment on this review, iTunes review thing?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple other, I think, because it's hard to get reviews in, and I just don't think we know they don't really matter that much. Right. They're nice. Like they're nice. They're not meaningless. It's not negative. You should get them if you can. But I think if you're going to spend your capital with your listeners on doing something, a CTA of some kind, don't have them leave a review. Have them tell someone else. Like
that's it.
Have them say, and I've noticed two guys that I listen to on an entertainment podcast say this now. They say, share this with a friend. Like if you're gonna get them to do one action, I think that's way more powerful than any review you're ever gonna leave. I don't think for the most part people leave reviews or use reviews like they use Amazon reviews. You know, go to Amazon, go to buy something, you're like, oh, if there's any question about the quality, you scroll down to the reviews, right? I'm not sure that happens as often. I'm sure it happens. I'm not sure it happens as often in the podcast world. Again, I know it happens. I'm going to get angry emails. Oh, I always check every single. Okay, well, good for you. Glad that you do that. But I think people telling other people is a way better way. If you're going to get one CTA, have them tell somebody else. Yeah,
this is I'm sharing on the screen here. I'm not sure what episode this is. Episode 708, schoolofpodcasting.com/708. I interviewed Eric Newsom, who's the co-founder of Magnificent Noise, but he also worked for the NPR. He's a big shot smarty pants. He's got a book called Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting. And one of the things, he was helping a client and they were trying to grow their audience, and they never asked people, hey, could you tell somebody else about the show? And he said, yeah, if you could do that maybe once a month. Because he said he was doing all this call to action of buy this and buy that. He goes, why don't you just not ask them to buy something and say, hey, instead, can you tell a friend? And he said, the guy called him back later, goes, there's got to be something wrong. He's like, why? He goes, because my numbers have almost tripled. And he's like, you maybe just tell people to tell other people, because birds of a feather flock together. And I'm working with a tool now where I can kind of randomly pick calls to action, and almost all of mine are like, hey, if you found this helpful, do you know somebody else who might, like this? Do me a favor and, tell them about it. So,
speaking of that, tell your friends, if you're listening right now, tell your friends about Ask the Podcast Coach, Saturday mornings, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. We'd love to have it. And click right down there, right? It's right down there. Click on the like button.
Yeah.
And it's free. It's free. It helps us.
Yeah. If you have a question and you want to jump on in, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, and that will have you jump on in. You can ask your question live. I know last week we had from Sonic Cupcake, Ed came in. Ed Sullivan. How can you forget Ed Sullivan? I know. That's
a really big show, really big.
Do you know that guy had the lead guitar player from Motley Crue has, and it's like a really hard to pronounce disease. It's like ciliolongitis kudos, and the lead singer it's where your spine starts to fuse together to where you can't bend. Okay. Yeah, it's nasty. And the lead guitar player of Motley Crue has that, which is why, they have to really think about, is he going to make it if they're going to tour? Because it's painful. And so did Ed Sullivan. So if you ever wonder why that guy when he says like the Beatles, and you're like, man, he moves weird. The guy couldn't move his back. Oh. And I was like, I did not know that. But
the old Ed Sullivan, not our friend.
Because I forget the name of the show. Jason is the host. He does a show about that particular disease. So here we go again with a kind of niche, a niche show, but he says it's helpful for other people like that. So here's a fun question and a link. If I say, man, Jim was really pissed off about something, is that explicit?
It is for some.
Yeah.
It still is in some communities. It is still that's vulgar.
That's
not many. Not many. Yeah. There's not many left that are.
I'll put a link. James Cridlin, being the Brit that he is.
The term "sucks" is too, by the way. That is when you say, "Man, that really sucked." That is there are still some parts where that's considered offensive.
Yeah. But this is this is not the. James put a link, and I didn't look at it, but somewhere he had a chart where it showed. I'll have to go back into Facebook and find it, but they were talking about different channels of the BBC. It kind of depends on what channel it was on. Like BBC 4 says yes, that's offensive. BBC 3, depending on where it was in the country and things like that. And then Daniel says, is it appropriate? That's my whole thing. Usually if you have to ask, that's my general rule. Yep. If you have to ask, it is. Yeah.
Just mark it explicit. I know people get all cranked up about that. Like, well, it's not available in some markets then. And I know India is one of them. And so that's 1.3 billion people. But like, if you're questionable, mark that thing explicit. Don't play that game.
Yeah.
Like, don't. YouTube's approach to this has been more of is it appropriate? Are you designing content just for children? Right. That's kind of the way they've separated that now. They have a no or a yes to that. Now, it's good to dig in to kind of figure out, what are they asking here? Like, what are they? Because I started thinking like, well, no, I make good content. It's appropriate for children. That's not what they're asking. They're asking, is the content you're creating designed to be for children? They want to monitor that. They want to make sure no weird stuff that's kind of looks like it's children's stuff, but it's really not. That's what they're trying to get at. So make sure on YouTube, most people who have a YouTube channel have figured this out by now, because they blasted us with spam until we got it figured out. But pretty crazy.
Then the other thing I thought I would bring up, we've talked about this per nauseum, that you can't play, Celine Dion, you can't play Taylor Swift, you can't play any music, pretty much period, unless it's, royalty free, blah, blah, blah. And I forget where I heard this. It might've been a Zoom meeting, but there was a company that was created to go out and find like unlicensed music. And apparently they've launched, because I'm going to say I've worked at Libsyn 4 years. I think I've seen 2 takedown notices, because like somebody was playing Eminem and blah, blah, blah. On Friday, there were 4 in one day. And I was like, whoa. So if you have unlicensed, if you're playing Elton John in your podcast, I'm just letting you know they're coming for you. So, and what they do is, because it came from Rob, is it goes up to a VP who goes over, listens to your show. Here's Elton John, and what he does is he removes it because it's from the RIAA, and he removes that. He doesn't delete it, but he pulls it out of your feed so it's no longer public, and then notifies you and says, "Hey, don't do that." So, and I don't know how many strikes you get. I don't know if it's a case where we would ever remove you, but I do know, because we don't want to get sued, we remove the file from the public. So that's probably something we're going to hear more about, because like I said, I haven't seen that many, period, and to have 4 in one day.
It's getting busy. Travel Gluten Free says in the chat room, if you on YouTube, some clarification, if you select that for children, they turn off commenting, which makes sense, right? And there's some special scrutiny going on right now on YouTube because they've had some problems with this. So don't get any indication like there's really intense scrutiny going on YouTube right now. So it's just kind of happening. Bang says they've revamped it, so I'll have to go in and take a look. I've been kind of ignoring the comments in there because like it just seemed like for 3 months I couldn't get them to stop reminding me, no, I don't make content. I don't make content for children. Now stop asking me, because they just kept asking and asking and asking, even though I set the perimeters.
You know, isn't it? I think you have to check it. You have to do it on every video, don't you? Have to now check. This is not.
No, I think you can. I think now this was from a month or two ago, and they're changing stuff all the time. But I thought if you select it at a default level in your settings, then everything going forward, and then you still can change it at I think you can change it at a level. You'd want to listen. I'm not a lawyer on this one. You're going to want to check you're going to want to check your own YouTube settings and dive into this as well to make sure you understand. The point is that you need to be paying attention, I think, on that.
Yeah. And it's just, there we go. Aliquity says there's a place you can select for all videos.
Yeah, I think you can.
That makes life a whole lot easier.
Well, but to go back to the explicit, right? That's just kind of one of those things you kind of just don't try to get through. Don't try to get past the system on this one. Just follow the rules.
Yeah, there's a novel idea.
Follow the rules.
Yeah. And and like we kind of said earlier, I think, and I remember the one time I had a guy at Libsyn contact me, and he was explaining that he was using the F word as an adjective.
Oh yeah.
Not a verb.
Right. So it changes the meaning. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's still the F word. And I'm like, that's not going to work.
It's still that word, by the way. It's still that word. And even if you try to change, like, hey, in my vocabulary, it doesn't. No, it's still that word. It is funny. I've got a bunch of friends in the UK, and there's a few words that I use that aren't necessarily, they're not bad, but they're not necessarily appropriate at times. And I say them, I don't mean to say them, and they kind of cringe when I do, kind of thing. So this is the tough. I mean, I think this is the tough part about as quickly as podcasting became a global reach. It really does highlight the differences we have in languages and understanding. And I like it when people just tell me, like, no, you shouldn't probably say that. And I'll have to next time. I'm still learning on this, and it's a process, right?
Absolutely. The other news that happened this week, I didn't even have that on my list. It just dawned on me. Stitcher got bought again.
Oh,
from they were, I want to say CW Scribs, the people that owned a whole bunch of stuff. They were newspaper people, and they turned into audio and media people, and they got bought basically by Sirius, who also owns Pandora, now owns Stitcher. So I'll be interested to see what happens to like the whole, are they going to do the same model? Because I know you can go over there and you can get all of Mark Maron's stuff, not just the last 50.
Right.
And I think it's like $5 a month. You can get all of Conan stuff, yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, On the other hand, I did hear again on James Cridlin, podnews.net, that I don't know if it's the first show, but it's definitely the one I've heard of that is leaving Luminary. Like they're now making their show public. So I was like, ooh, this could be, because that Luminary just keeps borrowing more money and now you see somebody jumping ship, and I'm like, ooh, that's not a good sign. I could be wrong, but I just like so. Gabrielle has a comment here about the whole kid thing. Says, as someone who worked in kids TV for years, you really want to know your P's and Q's when it comes to kid content. I would suggest checking out COPPA, COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Act. So,
yeah, it's a special place that really needs special consideration, and be really, really careful moving into that space. I think sometimes we just assume well, they're kids. Well, no, we need to be very, very careful in that space.
Yeah. And then going back to the Sirius thing, Sirius versus Spotify. Spotify just did a huge deal with some ad company whose name is escaping me. And I want to say it was like $20 million, but that ad company deals with things like Pepsi and Coke and things like that, which James was saying, it sounds like a lot of money until you realize that they do like billions of dollars of advertising. So 20 million is like a drop in the bucket, but it just goes to show you. And then I saw in an article where Spotify is testing interactive ads, and I'm not sure how well these are going to work, but the idea is that as you're listening on the Spotify app and an ad comes up for, whatever, Pepsi, you could click a button and it would take you to their website of some sort. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know how well that's going to work, because like I listened to a lot of podcasts this week while I was riding a bike, and my phone is on my arm. I'm not touching any buttons. I got that thing on autoplay.
Yeah.
But it's just more things are kind of big money's coming in. We'll see.
The ads are really cranking up on YouTube. Like I can't watch a video, a 20-minute video with any less than 6 to 8 ads in it now.
Wow.
And then a buddy of mine has ad blocking turned on his browser, and on YouTube, which we use to upload our podcast for Gallup. He was having functionality problems because he was blocking the ads. And he goes, Jim, they're everywhere. And I started looking, I kind of ignore ads now just because I've been in the space so long, you kind of stop seeing them. But I started looking, I'm like, wow, they are everywhere. So YouTube is definitely, and then every other time I log in, they're asking me, hey, do you want to do the 1-month trial of whatever the latest flavor of their paid service is to get ad-free YouTube? So it seemed to me, I don't know if they are or not, but to me, it seems like they have really cranked up the number of ads that you're getting in a show now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it'll be interesting to see. I know I did a thing once on Conan O'Brien, and I found out that 25% of his show was ads. Now granted, he does his best to keep them somewhat entertaining and stuff, but I was like, he should rename his show. Conan O'Brien needs some cash, apparently. This is interesting. Coach Dave says, when he was in Puerto Rico stationed, he goes, I discovered the chill hand sign. With the index finger out is also called Toro there.
Index finger? Not this? This is hang loose, right?
That's hang loose. The index finger is
like this?
Yeah.
Is it like this?
I'm thinking the one that nearly got me shot. The better known as the Ronnie James deal. Well, this is love, right? In sign language.
I think it is. I think this.
And then this is Ronnie James deal,
or hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em horns, or if you're Italian, you are now giving them the Maloik. It's the evil eye. So that's where people go, it's the sign of Satan. And I'm like, no, it's 2 fingers pointing in the air. Come on now. Bangs brings up a good point. He says maybe some of this is with the whole Spotify ad deal is because Facebook is pulling ads. And I heard this on the Newsworthy. That's my 2 news things in the morning when I listen. I listen to the Newsworthy with, I want to say Amanda, super fun show, and then James Cridlin. And they did a thing on Facebook where they audited themselves. Like Facebook handpicked auditors to see how well they're removing hate speech and things like that. And the report came out and it was like, well, how are you guys doing on that? And the answer was not good at all. Like really, really bad, which is causing more people to then want to pull their ads off of Facebook. So if you've ever thought of advertising on Facebook and don't mind maybe apparently occasionally being next to some hate speech, it's got to be dirt cheap right now, I would think. I don't know. We'll see. It's also, as everybody talks about this, like, is this going to be the end of Facebook? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll have to see. Daniel says, YouTube is now adding mid-roll ads on an 8-minute video. Used to be 10 minutes to do that. The mid-roll. Interesting. So
man, it seems like there's a guy I watch every day, and he has like 18 to 20 minute, videos. And I swear I'm getting like 6 ads. Like, so it's not just a mid-roll, it's a mid-roll and a mid-roll and a mid-roll and a mid-roll.
Yeah.
Like I swear it's every 3 minutes. I'm getting ads.
There's a type of ad now called, I think it's just called like an interruption ad. And it's literally like 5 seconds where like you're watching a video and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like Dave and Jim are on every Saturday morning at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. Ask thepodcastcoach.com/live. And then it goes back to the video. It's like just this little like, hey, we want to interrupt what you're doing because you were probably enjoying that to annoy you with this ad. And I'm just like,
it's getting kind of ridiculous. Just to be honest.
And it used to be you could see like a little yellow line was coming to show you where the ads were. So like you'd pull up a YouTube video and you're like, I'm not watching that. That does not seem to be the case anymore unless I'm missing something. It just seems like I'll be watching something. And I don't know if they get to pick where the ads are or not, but it's just like, about the time things are getting really good, I'm like, all right, hold on. Got to watch this guy, get his boner pill. All right, next. All right.
Bang says in the chat room, I pay the premium protection. That kind of sounds Mafia, like yeah, like someone's coming in like, hey, if you don't want the ads and you're gonna live in the neighborhood,
I can protect you from those.
I could
I can make sure they never bother you again.
Oh, it is. I mean, listen, it's typical. We knew this was coming. Like, if you did not know this was coming with YouTube, wake up, because this is how they all go, right? It all starts free, it all starts open, and then they begin to monetize that.
Look, you want to have a nice listening experience. It would be a shame if something happened to that nice listening experience.
It'd be a shame if you got ads every 2 minutes instead of every 5.
It's only $10. What are you gonna do with it? We can protect you.
I'll be back on Tuesday.
Oh, you never know.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Well, it's and I started watching more. I barely watch TV anymore. It's like if it is like YouTube just added more channels and said, oh, and by the way, we're raising your price. And I'm like, do I have to go back to Hulu now? And it's because it's kind of a hassle. I'm not even looking into it. It's like it wasn't a huge raise, but I found a show, and it's weird because I'm watching a show that's on Comedy Central, but I don't think it was actually ever on Comedy Central. The reason being, they drop the F-bomb all the time. And I'm like, wait, you can't wait. What? It's called Corporate. And it's kind of a more extreme version of The Office. And it was kind of like, hey, if you like this, you'll like this. And I started watching it. And it's kind of like if people were working for Amazon and they just buy companies and crush them. And my favorite was they had a whole thing on Women Would Love It, where there's two like executives and one is a female. And this one guy was talking about how he didn't like her tone, and she really was just talking normal. And then he was like, I never, my tone is always perfect in this office, and I never intimidate anyone with my voice. And you're like, okay. So they make some interesting points. But it was just, it dawned on me later. I'm like, wait, I'm kind of watching TV, but I still think I'm watching just basically YouTube videos that were on Comedy Central. Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, man, that second half went fast, Dave.
It went super fast. Holy cow.
I know.
Time flies when you're
It was a good conversation. Like I enjoyed that YouTube conversation because that's some good stuff. There's some changing things happening there. I think we need to pay attention.
It's going to be fun to watch just because they keep, I keep hearing about more people getting deplatformed and that whole 9 yards.
It's a big concern. I watch it for the Gallup stuff that we do all the time. I just have to be really, really careful because that's a big platform for us.
Yeah. So, Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, my buddy Paul Brerin is back. Paul is a good friend of the show, a Tesla owner. He's a gadget geek, and we cover about 19 topics in an hour and 40 minutes, and it was super great. So if you need something to kind of burn 2 hours and you want to talk tech, head over to theaverageguy.tv. It's posted now. This is the first time in about 6 months I've gotten it posted before the show, so it's ready right now.
Well, there you go. And on the School of Podcasting, it's either going to be one of two things. One, it will be a discussion with not only Glenn the Geek Hebert, but also his co-host, because as I mentioned earlier, they just recorded their 2,500th episode of Horses in the Morning. And so my question to him was like, how do you do that and not burn out? Like, how do you keep finding topics and things like that? So it will either be that interview, or I've had this in my brain. I've kind of been working on this in the back of my head for a while. And that is, I hear this question all the time. What are podcast best practices? Ooh. And I was like, all right. But I'm kind of worried about that one because a lot of it is like stuff I've said a million times.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, all right, maybe I've got a bunch of notes in Evernote on that. So I haven't decided. The thing is, I recorded the episode with Squadcast. So the cool thing is I have 3 files for the Glenn interview, which also means it's a little more fun to edit. So that's why it might not be out till next week. But stick around for some post show because Jim's going to talk about the mole. Sounds like a TV show.
That was really good. Like you did that well.
Yes, you have a mole update.
Well, I do. We joked about this last week, I think, in the post show. So I actually trapped one this week. I'll spare you the gory details. But I left it in place, thinking like, okay, this will be a warning to others. Certainly they won't continue to use this hole with a deceased member of their own in it. And they did. they just dug right underneath it and kept going. And wow. But I did get one. And we're continuing to work on the process of eliminating just a few more. Apparently they're territorial, which means that there's not many. Like the damage you see, you think you have 1,000 and it's really just maybe 1 or 2. So if you can capture or remove or entice them to go somewhere else, I was kind of hoping some of the things I was doing was just discouraging them. Like, maybe this isn't a great place. Maybe the neighborhood's gone downhill here. I just wanted them to think like, oh, the neighborhood's not really great anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else. That's fine. But yeah, so the trap is set in the spot. Apparently this lane they go through is very well traveled. And so others were trying to use it just this morning. So, but victory, Dave, victory. I did get one. I'm not as crazy as I sound, although I'm pretty crazy about these things. I mean, I go out 4 times a day and look for them. Like I'm looking for cracks in the ground and where I have turned into the caddy. I'm full Caddyshack. Full Caddyshack.
Here he is on the green and he got all of that one. Here you go. Excellent.
Cinderella story.
Bang said the Riverside.fm developer reached out to me and I directed him to you and SP. You might want to check out. I have not heard of Riverside.fm. What is it? Anybody know? Riverside.fm. Let me guess. It's going to help podcast the most reliably easy way to record your podcast remotely. Oh, so it's kind of a what you call it? It's a squadcast kind of thingy. If I look at their website here, riverside.fm, it's got people in multiple screens. Record your podcast on audio, video locally. Separate audio and video tracks for each guest. Live stream to YouTube, Facebook. Ooh, so it's a little bit of it's kind of what you call it. It's Squadcast meets Streamyard. Interesting. Trusted by the biggest podcasters, such as people I've never heard. The NFL Weekly podcast. That sounds good, but that doesn't mean it's from the NFL. Here's my thing. As long as it works, $15 a month for 5 hours a month of studio quality audio, which would work for most people. I forget what I'm paying Squadcast at the moment. But if I did this show and used it for interviews, I'd have to go the $30 a month thing. So, but I'm paying $25 right now for StreamYard.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Which is worth it. 10. They have 10 now. You can get 10 people on here.
Here's my question on that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Who no.
Well, for the way we do things, but there may be some very appropriate uses for it in some cases. Like, if you produce it well, I did 9 back before there was 10 available. I had 8. So the limit was 6 and I had 8 people. and I just kept 2 in the green room, or in the, what do we call it, backstage, at any given time. And I just had to bring them in and move them out based on the conversation. And that actually worked really, really well. So I just wouldn't have me personally would not have all 8 or 10 on the screen at the same time. But there may be an appropriate use for that. So, you don't want to limit that kind of creativity. If it works.
Yeah. Brennan is asking, is it 10 on screen? I think it is.
No, it's 10 on screen now. Yeah, it's 10 on screen, which is a weird number. Like I would have done 9 because it fits better on the 3x3.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That would make more sense, but I guess 9 in a host. The other thing, as I'm sitting here looking at StreamYard, if you think about it, I can mute Jim. So if I had a chatty Cathy, I could just politely, and that's so much fun. I've told you how I've been doing Zoom meetings for my church where everybody's 70 plus and they're all just using the phone line. And I have she should have her own podcast. I love Linda, but as soon as she joins, nobody else is getting a word in edgewise. Yeah. And boy, she took a breath and I hit mute and I was like, oh, oops, sorry. Let's let somebody else talk. So I guess if it was because that'd be my whole thing, people talking over each other. And I don't know that people can raise their hand like they can in Zoom here. But you could control the conversation. It would just be weird if Jim kept talking and I muted him.
Did you mute me? Am I muted?
Yeah, let me mute you. Hold on.
Am I?
There he is. And you can, which is great because you can see the little symbol on the screen that says, that's right. I muted you.
You've been muted. One of the things that concerns me, StreamYard is a great platform, and it was great because it was simple and it was stable. It was easy to find things, and it just worked. And one of the things, Dan and Gage have been a little bit slower on adding things just because they want to make sure stability is one of their pillars of service. I forget what they call it. They have this pillar of something. And obviously the branding's not strong enough that I remembered it. So, but it's good. I'm afraid they got a lot of pressure. I follow them in the Facebook group. They have a StreamYard Facebook group, and man, the pressure to do some of these things, to get more than 6, to add 1080p, to get different animations set up, to get videos longer than 3. I think it was 30 seconds to start with. You could have an animated video that was 30 seconds. Now it's like 5 minutes. I'm just afraid it becomes another Microsoft Office, which has so many options in it that it's unusable in some cases, but then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you don't want to use it. And then it takes, like, you have rookies coming in who don't know how to use it, and they got to ask 8,000 questions to be able to figure it out. I really liked it. I sound like an old guy, like, get off my lawn. I really liked it the way it was.
Back when it was
6 and it was easy and it was simple.
Yeah.
So I think just a word of caution on that one. Like, let's not jump the shark.
Yeah. Dave's asking, how does StreamYard handle low bandwidth connections with that many people? I know
pretty well.
Yeah. I know you can go into your settings and say, like, if I turn on camera and mic, I'm currently set at standard definition, which if I wanted to, I could go to low definition. If I wanted to, I could go down to 360. So now I'm just a little more blurry, not, again, how big is this on the screen? I guess if I'm on somebody's living room right now, I'm probably looking pretty bad, but
you're big and blotchy.
Yeah. But now if I go up to 720, now I'm nice and crisp and clear. Where I was at whatever it was, 480 is the middle. And it really kind of depends. There for a while we were having issues with my internet, and that was the first thing we did was like, okay, go down a notch and see how that works. But
no, and it's we've talked about this before, but it's based on the individual connections. So like I go to an Amazon server and you're going to an Amazon server. I'm not going to you and then streaming. So if your bandwidth is having trouble, it affects everybody. In this case, it's at the individual basis being recorded there on Amazon. So I think they handle it pretty well. And I think Gage has taken a lot of heat for not allowing 1080p. Everybody's like, we've got these 1080p cameras and I just can't,
Yeah.
And you're like, guys, relax. It's 720. It'll be fine. You're pushing this to YouTube. But there's some arguments. And as soon as we do 1080, they're going to want 4K.
That's it.
You're like,
Well, there are people that I always think it's interesting. they'll get a $50 meg plan at Libsyn, and then they'll rip their MP3 at 320 stereo, and it's, an hour and a half because they think they're Joe Rogan, and they're like, how can I be out of space? And I'm like, you're exporting at 320. Like, that's,
I know, but I need full fidelity. It has to be stereo.
Yeah. And I always just go, you do realize
I'm playing AC/DC.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you do realize this is going through earbuds and car stereos, or maybe an Amazon Alexa for 2% of your audience. And I'm like,
it could be a sound bar somewhere. Yeah, I know. Yeah. They just need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I said the magic word. She's yelling at me.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. You got to wear earbuds. That's just why you got to. If you're listening to a podcast, you just have to wear earbuds. Yeah.
But that's the other thing that I am starting to see more of, where people just, which is, again, it's job security, but they jump in, they record a podcast, they hit make MP3, and that's where they don't know what they're looking at. They just go, okay. I know a lot of these default programs are 256. What are we looking at?
David wants 4K and 60 frames per second just for this moment. Because when you're doing the coffee pour, it's important it's in 4K.
Chris says, Chris had a comment as well. It was way back here. He said, I used Riverside.fm for a 25-minute podcast. It was a bit buggy. I do like having the video. It gives you something to use for more compelling content than an audiogram to promote. Yeah, it'd be great to throw that. Well, it sends it to YouTube if you wanted to. So that would be kind of it automatically repurposes your stuff. He says, StreamYard is great, but I chose audio quality improvement over video 100% of the time. Plus separate tracks would be amazing. Yep. Yeah. So, and
I agree, by the way. I agree.
Nobody will notice, but I didn't hit record till about halfway through the recording today. So I may not. I've done this in the past where I've just used the YouTube video, or because StreamYard uses VBR. So where I don't think, if I go to the YouTube and strip out the audio, then I have a little more control over it. And
that's what I do. That's what I use, the YouTube video or audio.
Yeah. And I've found it's always interesting that when I go through and I'll figure out where I hit record, and then I'll find a place, and it's really not that noticeable. I mean, it is if you're listening for it, but I've never had somebody say, hey, at the 3-minute, 38-second mark, did you switch out the audio? Because all of a sudden Jim nobody ever says that. So
never. It's obviously the separate audio and separate channels coming together is a lot harder than it appears. Because if it was easy, it would have been done by now. I mean, we've seen some folks try it. I don't know, Squadcast or some of those, right, have tried that. And it's had mixed reviews of having the separate tracks to be able to do that. And I get why. I totally get why. But I think it's a way harder of a technology problem of streaming it on the internet and putting it back together and having it sync properly.
That's it.
Than we think. Yeah. Yeah. If it was easy, they'd have it. It would have been done. It would have worked. It'd been perfect. But nobody's doing it perfectly yet.
Yeah. The other thing,
I shouldn't say nobody. That was too demonstrative. I'm sure somebody is.
Well, I'm trying to. I just had a thought, and it went right in my head and right out the other side. Sorry. All right, it'll come back to me.
I interrupted you. Sorry, it's my bad. My mom would have said that it would have been a lie. Must have been a lie. Whenever I forgot something, she always said, "Oh, it must have been a lie."
There you go.
Why would you say that, Mom?
Yeah. Do I use the audio from the Rodecaster Pro? Yes. Can I get separate tracks with two people? Yeah, if I wanted to. I used to do that, and I would pan Jim ever so like 9% left, and I would pan me 9% right. 3 is not impossible. You just have to have a separate device. So I can have me here going directly in. I could have Jim over StreamYard, and I could have, you over Skype on my phone plugged into the Rodecaster, and then say, hey, give me separate tracks. Here's the thing, separate tracks. Here's a tip. One of the biggest things that's great about separate tracks is, and people do this naturally, it's not a problem, is they talk over each other. Like you thought he was done, but he wasn't, or whatever. And so when I do this one, I have Ben. Who is Ben?
Ben Kenobi?
Yeah, Glenn Hebert, his co-host Jamie, and me. And I'm going to line them all up, And then I'm going to look to see where are two tracks talking at the same time and figure out who's saying the most important thing and mute the other person. Other than that, for me, now that's the difference. I'm talking to podcasters. I'm not dealing most of the time with people with horrendous audio. But it is nice when somebody's really bad that I can go in and kind of clean it up. There you go. Can you stream this on YouTube and Facebook at the same time? Yes, I can. I choose not to because I have to read into this. I can't see the comments on Facebook. They have to do something on their side for them to come back.
You see them. You don't see their name.
Is that it?
It's blocked. Yeah, they have to go in and Chris Curran is working on this all the time. They have to go in and give permission on their end for Facebook and Streamyard to do its thing, and then the names will come across. You'll see the comments. It'll say Facebook user, and that's kind of a pain.
Right. You know? I'll have to do that then, because that's the reason I wasn't doing that is I just was like, well, because the last thing you want to do is give somebody a place for input and then don't see it. So I was like, I just started going to YouTube only.
I'm not a big fan of streaming on Facebook.
Yeah,
Well,
what I saw was like I had two people over there. I did it a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And then for me, I have to go over and then delete the YouTube. I have to delete the video on Facebook because that's only for patrons. So, Gabrielle, you never sent me your email. Remember, we're going to do that thing. You're going to do the podcast and we might do a little thingy thing. So you never emailed me. I'm just saying. Yeah. So,
for Gallup, we've chosen to be 100% YouTube, and it causes an issue from time to time. Somebody they want to join the chat room, but they don't want to create a channel because you have to have that to be in the chat room and some other things, right? Just some wonky, and I'm just kind of like, sorry, we're just not going to go to YouTube or we're not going to go to Facebook right now.
Yeah.
It's already confusing enough for people. I mean, I have a live page that, I embed those things just like we do here. That's the experience I really want. I want them to come to my live page. That's what I want.
That's it.
Because if I ever want to do something with them, I want them on my site. So I don't want them consuming it through Facebook. But
if I could
others do, and that's fine.
Yeah, my suggestion for StreamYard, I would love to be able to what we used to do with, I don't know what it was, Blab or whatever, where you could embed the video.
Yeah.
And a chat room. Remember, because that's what we were doing with. I think
that's the hang up. The chat room getting embedded together is hard.
Yeah, that's the tough thing.
Yeah, I end up sending them. So what I do is I send them to our live page, and then there's a link if you want to join chat. Click this link, and it'll take you to the YouTube instance. And so that's kind of what we do to get that done. And it works pretty well. But I just don't want them. I don't want them on Facebook. I just
Talking about separate tracks, Dave says the solve for him is when somebody has lower levels than others. So normalizing tracks. And I'm finding I saw this in a group that as cool as Auphonic is, I know I've run into this problem, and it was Kim Craggy from Toastmasters 101 saying that what it does sometimes is Auphonic has a hard time if you are a loud breather. So if you're a person that it will hear that and think it's a word and then boost it up. So all of a sudden you have Darth Vader, and it's kind of hard to then get that to go away, even if you have like a deep breath plugin, because the breath is so loud. The deep breath plugin is like, well, that can't be a breath. It was too loud. Yeah. So you have to almost de-breath it, then run it through StreamYard or run it through a some sort of noise gate before you run it in to gate out the breaths and things like that. But so it's always fun.
It's a challenge.
Wait, Brendan is saying that they actually did that on the Utah Podcast Summit. They were embedding the video from StreamYard. Interesting. Unless you don't know. I also haven't looked at so now there's this other thing, whatever .fm. I also haven't looked at Restream.io now has a studio. But I'm right now I'm like Restream kind of has everything I want it to do. I like the little ticker tape thingies and the sharing. And the other thing is that it works. That's the other thing people don't forget about. It's like, when was the last time that something really wonky happened that wasn't us? I mean, it was StreamYard. It's always our internet or something like that. It's not where, it's glitching out or people are getting kicked out or anything like that. So I don't know. We'll see. Dave says, I get non-podcasters who try to use their laptop microphones. Yep. Applying crumple pop echo remover to that track helps a bunch.
I had two. So I did 2 podcasts yesterday for Gallup, and both of them were in this. We're to this point now where the folks that care about their audio have bought really good equipment, and those that don't feel bad. So I brought both of them on. I'm like, do you have a headset? And they're like, nope. This is what I have, and this is as good as it gets. And I said, okay, well,
wow.
Okay. Like, well, it was good enough. I did this and it was good enough. And I'm like, well, okay. Yeah. So we're to that point now where those that aren't, and I don't know what the resistance to like, there are people who just have an absolute resistance to a headset, and it's a million times better. You know, I've got this, in fact, I brought mine home. I've got this Jabra Elite 40. No, it's not the Elite version, but and the Q2Us, Banks saying Q2s are back in stock. They're easy to find and easy to buy now.
B&H,
easier. But they just, and I'm like, just put your freaking headphones on. Like, we do this for audio, not video. And but there's just people who have this aversion to it, and I don't know if what they're scared of, but they won't wear a headset. They won't even try to figure it out. They're like, nope, I'm not doing it. Like, well, okay.
Too bad. I had
all right.
I was interviewed on a show, which was interesting because the first time they booked me, they didn't show up. They didn't send me a link, and I'm like, hey, where's the link? It's 12:15. I'm ready to go. So they're like, oh, we're so sorry. And there's so many people involved with this. There's like a producer and then the host and blah, blah. So finally it comes 12:15. They're like, hey, we're so sorry. We had some other people show up and we're running long. And I'm like, could you not say come back later? I'm like, okay. So an hour after I'm supposed to be interviewed, I'm finally joining their Zoom link, and they were using OBS somehow to go to Zoom. And so I'm now dealing with the host, who's very nice, lovely woman, but they hired a quote podcast guy to help with this. And I can't hear her. I can hear him. His mic is right next to him. And I'm like, what microphone are you near? Because that's what I'm hearing you through. And he's like, well, we don't have any mics turned on. I'm like, yeah, you do, because I'm hearing you. And I said, but I can't hear her. So they're trying some other things. I said, well, why not just go down to the Zoom? There's a thing right next to the microphone. And I'm not making this up. This is what he said. You ready? I teach a podcast course. And I literally got triggered to where I thought I was married again. I was like, whoa.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, and the black dog that's been beat too much, and I was like, okay, well, I'm sorry. My background's in teaching, and I know, well, we're not using Zoom. We're using OBS, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, they logged out, logged back in, blah, blah, blah. And I had to crank up my headphones so I could hear her. And the quote podcast guy never got their audio working to where I could hear her. But I was just like, wow. And that's one of those things where you got to kind of sit back and remember that we're in a COVID situation, and like some people are handling stress worse than others. But it really knocked me for about 2 hours. I was like, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? I'm like, no, you tried to help. And that guy's a dick. I mean, that man's a nut. Yeah, I was just like, so that was kind of fun. Now, this was an interview. So I can't wait till and here's my guess. I bet they never let me know when it's published. That's the other thing that I've started to do is I now make a list of people I've been interviewed on, and I'm going to go back and go, did you publish that? Because like, not that my time is worth more than anybody else's, but I gave you like 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. The idea being I'm going to get some promotion from this. And I was like, so that was an interesting experience. So I was like, okay, but and I forgot to mention the other part. The interview, I'm telling you, I did 2 pages of homework. I had to give them 10 questions to ask me. And I'm like, isn't that kind of your job? Like, so it was a very odd experience. I'll have to, so I'll have to reach back out and go, hey, when is that going to publish? So,
well, they're people, right? We're dealing with people, and it's just is sometimes is a challenge to be able to on both ends of the spectrum. It's just always just a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't mad about the rescheduling because we've all done that. We just go, oh, I thought it was yesterday. Sorry. Oops.
I think Liquidy asked a question out there
Um,
about, oh no, Carrie asked a question out there about curious of your thoughts. It's a two-part it's a two-part question. Go back
Okay.
up a little bit.
little
To
further.
I don't let anyone know. Let's see, where's the first part of that
Working
question?
my first course online.
Yeah, there we go. Question. I'm working my first course online, doing initial research calls to get clarity on common struggles.
Good.
I'm considering also turning the convos into podcast episodes.
Okay.
Then the second part of the question. Curious of your thoughts. Is this a good way to get podcast content, or if you think it'd be more of a distraction and a different vibe from a typical podcast interview?
I think it'd be
Dave?
nice because it wasn't a typical podcast interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
It's worth a try.
Yeah, it's worth a shot.
Try one and get some feedback.
Well, the thing is, I've seen people do this where there's a guy now, he's on Facebook, he's doing a bunch of ads, and he's talking about how I can help you make money with a podcast like right now. I've got the proven system, and here's what it is. Well, what he does is he interviews potential consulting clients, basically, and he's using that to open the door for a conversation, and then they get to see he's a nice guy, and then from there he starts hammering away to get them to be a client, and according to him it works a lot. So that might be something where, if you can get people to identify and go, ooh, I have the same problems and blah blah blah, and you can say, oh, we actually address that in the blah 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 course. Sure, I think it's worth a shot. And if it's it's one of the things,
try it one time.
Yeah,
get some feedback and see. I've seen YouTubers and podcasters pivot on something like that where they try it, or it's I mean, let's admit the coffee pour came out of a goofy little
right.
I was just drinking coffee down here. In fact, Emily made fun of it when she came on and acted like me. She came in and she co-hosted when I was gone, and she did all the things, all little weird things that I do. And all of a sudden we were like, hey, why don't we just use that as a sponsored spot? Why? And so I think, Carrie, those times when you're experimenting with those pieces, don't commit to them, but experiment with them and try them. And if you get some great feedback, do it again. Just do it again till someone tells you to stop.
Well, that's something I'm noticing as I'm doing interviews for this other show, this whole grow your community thing. Those people are not afraid to experiment at all.
Yeah,
they do it all the time.
No, right on. It's herky jerky, and I think if you get too radical, and you like, hey, I'm going to have this new monthly segment or weekly segment, and it's super radical, it's hard to pull those back once you've kind of committed to it. But if you just throw it in one time, you can always walk away from it if it's not very good.
It's worth a shot. Dave says, I like to ask people I'm going to interview if there's anything they'd like to talk about, or if they see frequently asked questions. I did that. I have a member of the School of Podcasting who does a health podcast, and he's like, any chance I could come on the Logical Weight Loss podcast? And I'm like, what's your top 10? What's the thing that you love to talk about? What's your expertise? And if it fits my audience, absolutely, but let's connect the dots here first. And then I'm not usually a big fan of pre-interviews, but he was like, do you want to do a pre-interview? And I'm like, yeah, let's brainstorm and figure out, how you're going to fit the audience. Cause he's got a huge background.
I like the pre-interview when we do them. I like them week or two ahead, not a day before, because there's a weird psychological effect that takes when you and I had the conversation, and then I've already talked to you about it. And then the next time I talk about it, it doesn't feel fresh, and it just doesn't come off as well. Where if it's been a week or more, well, chances are your brain's kind of forgotten about it and it can be fresh. So I like to get those pre-interviews way ahead if possible, because I don't want them to remember. I want it to be I want to work out the content, but I also want it to be fresh.
Yeah. Dave says, there have been videos I've made that take longer pre-recording than the actual recording episode. Yep.
Yeah.
Get everything. So
we've gone into a mode. Go ahead and read that one, then I'll
Liquidity says, I give people a pre-interview form I made in Google Forms, and one of the questions is, what would they like me to ask them?
It's a good question. That's a really good question.
I kind of like that. There's a line there where, because part of me wants to go, well, your audience, because you did your homework, me, why do I have to connect the dots? But I get that. I always kind of, or a lot of times I'll just go, is there anything else we should talk about before I let you go? And then I just edit that out because that's a horrible, like, I don't want to sound like I'm unprepared.
Right.
And then be like, well, we could talk about so-and-so. Oh, great. Let me ask you this. Okay, great. And then you just edit it out. So, but I mean, this was like the thing I did. I'm pretty sure they just, I don't know, Google podcasting and they came up and they're like, here, and it was like lengthy. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, and for all I know, they have 4 downloads an episode. I don't really usually care about that kind of stuff, but I was kind of like, this better get published because by the time I did the homework and everything else, I'm like,
we've been using a new technique at Gallup that maybe not new to me, where we do this kind of like micro batching. So I get a guest ready, and we want to record shorter edited segments. But I want to do those in a batch process and maybe do 2 or 3 in one sitting. But we do everything live, right? So I've jammed all this together where we have a live show. I don't take questions during the recorded part that I'm going to edit to make the shorter versions. But then we have these mid shows. So I have a pre-show. Hey, welcome everybody, right? Because you want to engage that live audience. Then we record like there's nobody there. We don't. Sometimes we address the crowd, but in a lot of cases we don't. We plow through the material. Then in the mid-show, we answer the questions that they had that while we were recording, so that recorded content doesn't necessarily feel like, when we edit it down, doesn't necessarily feel like a live show. It feels more like, we don't get distracted. We're getting through the content, right? But it also honors the live people. And I've done this where we've done 3 in a row. So we recorded one, did a mid-show, recorded one, did a mid-show, recorded one, did a post-show. That has been working really well to get all those different, like, we get shorter shows to post for the podcast. We get a longer show for the live show, and we interact with the crowd. So we get that engagement. We get both that way. And in the past, I was doing these super long live shows that I was posting as a podcast. I don't know if they were getting the engagement. Now that we edit them down to 20 minutes, I think we're getting a little bit more engagement on those. And I can get 3 done at once. You can do 3 in an hour.
Nice.
Change. Yeah. So it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. It's a little bit of a trick, and it's a lot of producing, live. I have to be very cautious of what we're doing and follow a script, but it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. John was asking me, hey, I see you moved from the pod mic, which is a great mic and a great weapon. You must have caught me when I used this once.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad mic. It's a little plosive-y. I know it's got this big screen on it and everything like that, but unless it's an SM7B is the only thing I've ever heard that my ears went, ooh, I like how that sounds. But I love, the biggest thing I love about the RE320 for me is it doesn't have much of a proximity effect. So if I'm moving around and I'm reading things, it doesn't really change much in tone. So where some microphones, the closer you get, the bassier you get and things like that. So when I got the RE320 years ago, I was like, ooh, I like this. And so I've just been a big fan ever since. But,
how's my audio been today? Has it been okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a weird thing, and it might've been your internet. There was a weird thing where every now and then you would get like loud.
Yeah.
For like a second and a half. And then you would go back and.
So here's what I think that's happening with that, by the way, because that's been a common problem. I need to fix this. I have my PCs right in front of me, and they have fans. And when I'm running some things, I have a fan in particular that is pretty loud that you can't really hear, but I think what it's doing is it's just loud enough that Streamyard is picking it up so it raises the volume up, trying to do it. And then as soon as I start talking, it jams that back down. And I notice when I turn that process off and shut that fan off, it doesn't do it. Here's what I need to do. I need to get it quieter down here in this space that I'm at. It's just at this point, the equipment is catching up and I have too much fan noise. So I need to move that box somewhere else where it's farther away. And I'm going to do that today. It's farther away and quieter, and I'm not getting, because it whines a little bit. And I'm like, why is that happening to me? I'm pretty sure I just shut that off. So that thing should quiet down. But yeah, I get that weird effect. People have told me I get that, and I'm pretty sure it's the fans. So I need to shield those off so I don't, so they're not so loud here in this proximity.
Yeah. John says, I think we are kind of well balanced, and I'm trying to think about this. It's, where is StreamYard getting, like, what's the mixer for StreamYard?
That's a great question. I don't know. They're doing some algorithm behind the scenes to balance us out, right? There's something going on to make that work. I don't know what that is. They have an auto, I let them do the processing, which adds some audio ducking in there, which isn't always great. But if I turn that off in my system, I get some weird artifacts. I do not know what they are. So I just leave it. I let them do the processing. But I don't know.
That's one of the things I might be moving this year. We'll see. There's it's one of those things where I should, in theory, it makes sense for everyone involved. But my sister, who I love dearly, is involved, which means just because it makes sense doesn't mean she's on board, kind of thing. But I would basically be moving back into the house I grew up in. And I was thinking about it last night. I'm like, ooh, I could play music loud. I could set up a room and have it all soundproofed. I was like, all sorts of cool stuff that having a home could do. But I was also thinking about that, like, I got to make sure, like it's weird. I don't know that I would use because on one hand, I'm like, there's one little bedroom that's literally big enough for like a dresser and a bed. And I was like, ooh, that'd be a great place to record. I'm like, no, not really. Because a lot of times you want a camera a little further out, than like, mine's right on top of me.
Right.
And I'm already thinking ahead, but I got to get my sister to buy into it. And
I don't want to do construction down here. I don't do this enough, and I don't make any money off of this. So it's not like Dave. It's not, well, I know this is uncomfortable for you, but I'm missing my July check from you, Dave. So if you could, I didn't get that on the first, like I expected from you. But in this case, and I moved back to Gallup for the studio stuff, but there are some things I can do to move equipment around, I think, to isolate a little bit more, to get rid of that fan. It's a whining sound that it's super high pitched, and I don't think I hear it as well, but I think it's getting picked up by the
microphone.
So,
The office hours today is at 1:00. I will send you a link to all the patrons shortly.
Holy cow, it's 7 after already. Jeez.
Yeah, and Brennan just said Tom Webster's on the New Media Show today.
Oh, cool.
That is going to be fun because there are times when Todd and Tom have disagreed on certain things, so that'll be fun to watch.
Todd drives me crazy sometimes, but he absolutely has what it takes to do these kinds of interviews. He is really good at this, and he will be professional,
right?
And it will be appropriate, but he's not afraid. Like, he's like, in some ways, he's like a journalist where he's not afraid to ask the questions that need to be asked. When we get in front of some of those folks, we just serve them softballs. I just want you to look good. No, Todd actually wants to get to the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so I do appreciate that about him, is those interviews are typically pretty good. That should be a pretty good interview.
Because Tom did the thing where he was saying that it was something like 80% of all the ads are from these 5 companies. And Todd was like, well, if they would share some, like, we've got all these indies over here that would love that stuff.
Right.
And he kind of had a problem with the way, I don't think Tom reported all the details of that. So that's I might have to listen to that while I'm getting ready for the 1:00 meeting. So awesome. All right. Well,
wow. Great. That meant this morning went like that. Thanks, chat room. They were pretty great. So appreciate it. Have a great weekend, Dave.
Yeah. Hope you have another great mole story.
I'm going checking right now. Like, it's been an hour and a half, maybe 2. Since I set the track, because I set it right before the show.
You need one of those cameras, that you can just on the trap, and there you go.
We're going to call it the trap cam. I just need to get it. I'm telling you, I've gone full Caddyshack, and this is going to be the trap cam, and it's just going to sit there. And I've also thought about putting a motion sensor on top of the trap, so when it goes off, it alerts me, and I get a little notification. Nice. So yeah, I'm all in, Dave. I am all in. We'll have good. I'll report back. We'll see you next week. All right,
we'll see you. Take care.